Eleanor Johnson was a beloved mother and granddaughter. That's why her passing wasn't an easy one. The whole family was broken and focused their attention on the best way to honor her. She had always said she wanted to be buried on church grounds, so that was what they arranged. However, as soon as her casket arrived at the church, the priest told them some unexpected news. The funeral was canceled. Father James' eyes were filled with sadness and regret as he refused to bury the casket. Eleanor's children couldn't believe what they were hearing. They wanted to know why exactly Priest James refused, but he was very vague about it. Priest James wasn't telling them everything he knew, and that was very clear. So Eleanor's children did everything they could to get the truth out of him. Finally, it overheard a conversation, but what the priest said there made them call the police. This was just too strange to be true, really. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Eleanor Johnson was a matriarch in her family. She was the oldest daughter, making important family decisions and providing guidance and wisdom to all her family members. She was at the ripe age of 87 when she peacefully passed, but it was still a stab in the heart for many. She had always been a woman of faith, going to the church every Sunday and every holy day there was. Because of her, her children and even their children became religious, bringing in a sense of togetherness inside the family. And that's one of the reasons why her passing was so hard on everybody. She had been the leader of the group, whether subconsciously or not. To honor her influence, the family decided to bury her in the church cemetery. They arranged everything with the church, and within 3 days, it was time for the funeral. "Where's your brother Theo and his family?" Priest James asked her. Constance told him they would be at the church any moment now. Priest James silently nodded, and Eleanor Constance had to think for a moment, but then she remembered. "She will arrive at the same time as Theo?" I think James silently nodded again. "Which is something wrong?" Constance asked. James's expression immediately changed. He put up a slight smile and told Constance it was all fine, but she could see he was faking it. Before she had time to ask more questions, Priest James nodded his head goodbye and disappeared into a side door. Constance sighed. What was going on with Priest James? It couldn't be all because of Eleanor's passing, right? She wanted to go after him, but at that moment she heard someone yell her name from behind her. Constance hugged her brother hello. They greeted each other in the same happy but sad way you greet anyone at a funeral. "Where's Mother?" Constance eventually asked. "They're bringing her in as we speak." They greeted the driver and told him where to bring her casket. But just as they wanted to move the casket, Priest James walked toward them with an urgent look on his face. "Good morning," Priest James, the driver, kindly said. "But good morning, Eric. I'm sorry. But there is a slight problem," Priest James continued. "I cannot let you bring the casket inside. I recently came upon something, and I'm saddened to say the funeral cannot continue." I'm afraid I can't say more. Tears welled up in Constance's eyes as realization set in. She looked at her brother and grabbed his hand in comfort. "What do we do now?" Constance asked. "I have no idea," Theo answered. "We have to find out what the priest discovered." Constance looked at the driver. "How long can you stay?" she asked him. "I have to leave in 15 minutes, but maybe it's best that I bring the casket back to the morgue for temporary storage." Constance felt a knot form in her stomach. This was one of the worst things that could happen today. Constance watched the car disappear in the distance and wiped a tear from her cheek. Theo and Constance decided to split up, and one of them had to stay close to the children while the other searched the church for Priest James. Constance told her eldest child, who was 15, to look after the little ones while she was away. Before her daughter could question her, she quickly walked away. She searched all over the place, but some of the areas inside the church were forbidden for regular people. Sadly, Priest James was nowhere to be seen. He had to find another way to get to the priest. Suddenly, he had an idea. He had to lure the priest out. He creaked the door open a bit, just enough so whoever was inside would be able to hear everything that went down in the hallway. Then he began to talk very loudly. "What do you mean the painting is broken?" he shouted. "And the holy statue of Maria as well. Who did this?" He listened carefully and heard footsteps coming his way. Then, Priest James suddenly appeared out of the room, clearly bewildered and looking around for what was happening. Theo's plan had worked. He quickly jumped in front of Priest James before he could walk away. Priest, I've been looking for you," he said. "Sorry, Theo, I have to look into something," Priest James said as he tried to walk away. "Oh, the statue thing, that was nothing. I just had to get you out of there." Priest James stopped in his tracks. "You did that on purpose?" Theo nodded his head. "You can't just cancel a funeral at the last minute without an explanation. You have to tell us, or we'll get the police involved," she said as a final punch. Finally, she saw Priest James's demeanor change. He sighed and told them to wait in one of the private rooms. There, he would explain everything. Even though Theo and Constance were a bit hesitant to believe Priest James, they figured that since he was a man of God, he wouldn't lie to them. They headed to the private room and waited there. As hours seemed to pass, the weight of their confinement bore down on them. The dim light from the single window cast elongated shadows, mimicking their sinking spirits. "What if we're stuck here forever, ever?" Theo Constance whispered, her voice shaking. Theo, trying to mask his own fears, took a deep breath. "We won't be," he replied, though doubt echoed in his voice. Just when hope seemed to wane, Constance's eyes fell upon a leather-bound book, worn with age, titled The Chronicles of Saint. "This could be something," she said, pulling it from the shelf. As she opened the cover, a folded parchment fell out. Theo caught it and read aloud. At first glance, it appeared to be a chapel, but the religious symbols that adorned its walls were unfamiliar, a stark deviation from the teachings Constance and Theo had known. An altar stood at the room's center, surrounded by unusual markings and icons. "This isn't the faith we know," Theo whispered, a sense of unease settling in. Once Constance approached a stone podium, atop which lay a book, its pages yellowed with age. She began to read aloud, her voice trembling as she described rituals and prayers dedicated to a deity neither sibling had ever heard of. Who is this elder god, she wondered aloud. Theo, studying the symbols, replied, "It seems we've stumbled upon a sanctuary dedicated to ancient worship. Long before our faith was established, the very ground seemed to pulse with the energy of past rituals." As Theo traced the patterns on the floor, he discovered a concealed hatch, hinting at yet more secrets below. "Look here," he motioned to Constance. "There's another level beneath us." With trepidation, they approached the hatch. Pulling it open revealed a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Hand in hand, they began their descent, each step echoing their determination to unravel the mystery of their faith's hidden roots. Stepping out from the narrow staircase, they found themselves hidden behind the curtains of an ornate confession booth. Suddenly, the curtains rustled, and before they could react, they were face to face with Priest James. Constance, taking the lead, stepped closer to Priest James. "Tell us what's going on," she demanded, her voice stern. But the priest was elusive. Darting past them, he moved quickly towards the main door, shouting for the guards. Cornered in a chamber, Priest James was left with no escape. The siblings pressed him for answers. "Why hide this from the congregation?" "What are these rituals for?" Theo asked. "We took oaths older than the church itself." "It wasn't for the congregation to know," he replied, hinting at a much larger web of deceit. As Priest James began to unravel the story, the depths of the conspiracy became clearer. The church, over the centuries, had managed to cover up the origins of their faith, replacing it with teachings more palatable for the masses. With his voice shaking, Priest James began. "Baptism, in our faith, is not just a ritual of initiation. It's a bond, a covenant of sorts. Those baptized here are bound to protect the church and its secrets, willingly or otherwise. It is in these grounds, they're not just holy, they're alive, sensing, discerning the true intentions of those who enter." Eleanor knew, he continued. She had always known about our traditions, our true roots, but she never agreed. She believed in transparency, in letting people choose their path. That's why she never got baptized here. Constance and Theo exchanged glances. Eleanor, as it turned out, had been a significant figure within the church's hierarchy. Her wisdom and influence were unmatched. However, she'd grown wary of the direction the church was taking, and of the secrets it was burying. She wanted change, and many followed her, leading to divisions. Priest James confessed. She could have exposed everything, but she chose a path of peace for the sake of unity. Now, with his secrets laid bare, the Priest James's posture changed from that of a cornered prey to a seasoned negotiator. Constance and Theo looked at each other, weighing the weight of knowledge against the price of silence. "She deserves a proper farewell without any hidden agenda." Theo's voice echoed with determination. Constance nodded. "It's non-negotiable. Eleanor gets the respect she deserves, and you ensure it's done right." They both stood unwavering, leaving no room for dissent. Birds chirped softly and the light filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the earth below. Here, surrounded by nature's serenity, Eleanor would find her eternal rest in the very heart of the church's most sacred grounds. As one by one, family members approached the burial site, each bearing their own token of love. A niece placed a bouquet of Eleanor's favorite lilies, while a grandson played a haunting melody on his violin, a tune Eleanor used to hum. The air was thick with emotion as stories were recounted, tales of adventure, lessons of wisdom, and always the laughter and love Eleanor had shared. As the wind rustled the leaves overhead, Constance took a deep breath and began to share the revelations of the past few days. When the weight of the day's revelations began to sink in, the air of solemnity was slowly replaced with a sense of peace. Hand in hand, the family began to reminisce, letting the happy memories overshadow the recent trials. And as the family dispersed, there was a palpable sense of unity and admiration. Eleanor's resilience, her quest for truth, and her unwavering spirit were not just memories to cherish, but a legacy to carry forward. In the quiet of the evening, the message was clear: Eleanor's essence would forever be a beacon for her family.